All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all doing well today. We're delighted to have so many of you join us for our webinar today, Getting User-Centered Insights at Scale, Lessons from American Express. My name is Lynette, and I'm part of the team here at AnswerLab. Before we start, just want to run through a couple of quick housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, and everyone will receive a recording via email afterward. So if for any reason you're disconnected or we will make sure you still receive this content. If you have any questions you'd like to submit, you can do so via the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And if we have time, we will try and answer them at the end of the discussion. We're going to do our best to keep this to 45 minutes so you can stay on track for the rest of your day. For those of you that aren't familiar with AnswerLab, we are a full-service UX research company. We provide user experience research, consulting services, and flexible research engagement models to help companies apply a human-centered design process to every product that they launch. Our mission is to help create experiences that people love. In today's discussion, we'll be chatting with Dana Crisfield and Risha Lee, Directors of UX Research at American Express, and Joseph Friedman, a research manager here at AnswerLab.
Thanks, Lynette. Let's kick off with the discussion. As Lynette introduced, I'm a UX research manager here at AnswerLab, and I'll be facilitating today's conversation. I've had the pleasure of working with Risha and Dana as AnswerLab has embedded consultants within Amex products and services, provided research support, and has set up and executed large research programs over the last few years. I'm most excited to use this time today to get their reflections on the amazing work and UX growth that they've been leading. So just to get started, let's set the stage. Can you each tell us about your roles at American Express? Risha, why don't you start?
Thanks, Joseph. And just want to say thank you for having us. I'm so excited to be here and to talk about the work that we've done. To answer your question, I am the Director of UX Research for American Express's B2B division, Global Commercial Services. I manage a team of amazing researchers who work on multiple work streams across Amex's B2B product work streams. And in my overall role, I set the vision for the team. I have strategic oversight over all of the work streams, and I collaborate with cross-functional colleagues and vendors to gain buy-in and evangelize UX research to business partners. Thanks.
And what about you, Dana?
Hello, everyone. Thank you to AnswerLab, and thank you for all of you for joining today and taking some time off your schedules. I've been with Amex for just 2.5 years, which is really extremely short in Amex time. Much of my career has been spent in research, the UX research variety in financial services and a few other areas of industry, and then the academic variety in the public health space. At Amex, I lead a team doing research and research operations, and we're part of the design organization and work closely with a large number of design and product teams. As Risha pointed out, there are a number of research teams at Amex, each focused on different types of customers. So for my team, that's the people who rely on us for their personal financial and banking needs.
Okay, and so thank you both again for joining us today, two wonderful UX directors from two different areas of Amex. Dana, why don't you go first to set the stage a little bit more? Can you tell us what your current goals and research priorities are, both strategically and tactically?
Sure. In terms of strategic priorities, we're focused on maturing the craft of research and making sure we're poised to meet the next moment and each next moment after that with the right capabilities and tools and partnerships and expertise that we need. And we're also focused on making sure that in research, we're hearing from a set of people who are representative of our entire audience. So not just those it's easy to get access to, but everyone that we're building products for. When we look back over the year and all of the research participants that we interacted with in lots of different ways, are there voices that we didn't hear from or we didn't hear enough from? And what are some shifts that we can make going forward to change that? On the tactical side, our priorities include the care and feeding of our research library and the work we're doing now on the Insights Hub portion of the library to catalog and curate insights and free them from the bounds of individual research reports. We're also expanding our use of exploratory methods, specifically and applying an exploratory lens really to the bigger, higher priority questions that are spanning product verticals. And that's meant building out a lot of the capabilities and the collaboration frameworks that allow multiple researchers, both researchers internally and in partnership with our partners, to work smoothly together on larger longitudinal studies. And then I think the other thing worth mentioning on the tactical side is we're expanding our research operations team so that we can continue building out the functions and processes that group is able to support.
And what about you, Risha?
So I'm going to talk about the vision first at a high level. So as a personal and professional goal, I think UX is a really, really powerful tool in transforming our understanding of problem spaces. And what do I mean by that? I mean that in each individual industry we work in, we are contributing to an understanding of our users within a particular context. In this case, the world of financial services. And I think that the job of the UX team in particular is to try and leverage the users' voices so that we can make the world of financial services more equitable and accessible. So that's always where I'm going with the strategy that I'm proposing, although my methods often have madness. We are currently stacked against multiple strategic business priorities, and those are roughly according to the product line. Our high priority is to support and deliver on those initiatives so that our partners can achieve their stated business outcomes. And again, cross-functional collaboration, designers, operations, product and tech teams, as well as vendors is very important in achieving that goal. Again, a higher level goal is to have UX research embedded, and Joseph, a way you've referred to it in the past is full stack research, which I really like. So a mix of generative and evaluative methods, so that we're asking the right questions at every stage in the product life cycle. So and that we're also asking them at the right time, so we can balance every business decision with a sound evidence-based justification and how it will impact user needs and behavior.
Great, thank you so much. And so as all of you, both of you have this both strategic journey that you're on and the tactical ways you're applying that vision, how would you describe where your team is on its research journey at Amex? Dana, do you want to answer first?
Sure. Just in terms of what we want to achieve, I think we want to ensure that designers and product teams have continual, frequent access to our customers' lived experiences, those financial contexts they find themselves in, and the ways that they make sense of all the options that they have in those contexts. And that messy space is where all the good opportunities are hiding. So and here I'm referring to the opportunities to make that, less complex or less stressful or less life interrupting. And we want to make sure that our teams have access, meaning our teams, meaning product design teams, have access to that throughout the life cycle of their own work, and that they have our support in making sense of that and utilizing it not just as information, but as knowledge, so that research isn't just another tool that is coming at them, but a really indispensable one in their work. And for us, that means making lots of research available and doing that across a variety of formats and cadences. So that's a lot of where we are now in our journey, is expanding all of those formats and making it more available. For us, that has also meant broadening the definition a little bit to include all the ways that customers engage with us. So beyond the live research sessions that we do and all the ways that we connect asynchronously with our participants, our customers are also calling in for support. They're also giving online feedback while they're in the middle of struggling to complete a task. And that's all the same people talking about the same features that they love to use or that they might be struggling with in the moment. And doing that they're doing that in a context that might show a different view into those particular experiences than we would have access to otherwise throughout research. So we aren't fully there yet, but we've made a lot of progress in broadening the forums and platforms for hearing from current customers and people who might one day be customers.
Thanks for sharing. And what about you, Risha? Where is your research team on its way at Amex? What have you achieved and what do you hope to achieve?
So I'm extraordinarily proud of what my team has been able to achieve in a relatively short amount of time. Over the past year, we've tripled in size to support multiple areas of the business, and we're still growing. We've gone from a team that offers only a single method of research, usability testing, to one that incorporates both generative and evaluative methods of multiple breadth. I don't think you can say multiple breadth, of great breadth. And through our successes, we've built the case that UX is a crucial strategic partner in product development. And we've begun to build valuable relationships with product decision makers who proactively involve us. What I'm hoping to achieve is a team of empowered researchers who feel confident and excited about the UX magic that they bring to the table. And from partners, a sense of optimism, ownership, and creativity about their power to drive user centricity at Amex.
Great, thank you so much. So now that we've set the stage, let's dive right into scaling and maturing your UX practice. As we chat, our team has put together some thought starters for all of you in the audience to consider how to apply this conversation to your own teams and to your own work. And just a note, feel free to make use of the chat as we talk today. Ask questions, respond to things you like, deliver feedback in the moment. The panelists here and us as hosts, we're always open to hearing how this conversation resonates with you. So how would you say, Risha, your teams have navigated scaling and maturing your UX practice? Do you consider these to be two separate avenues?
That's a great question. I think that, to reiterate, we've scaled pretty quickly over the last year. And to do that, we've needed to supply use cases of successful projects to prove our impact and value. And we focus mostly on qualitative research to date. Our main impact has been in giving our partners a clear view of the humans for whom they're designing. So questions like, how do target users work on a day-to-day basis? What do they feel about certain tasks? Which of their needs are unmet? This is the stuff of reality that's really difficult to quantify in numbers, but is actually the way that real people experience our products and services. So once our partners are bought into those stories, they have a much deeper understanding, or we could say maturity, for what user experience actually is. And they are in a much improved situation to ideate solutions for real human problems. So to answer your original question, I think that you can say that both scaling and maturing are actually two interrelated outcomes of implementing UX research in the right way.
And what about you, Dana? How would you respond to that question?
I think they are two separate things, and they don't necessarily progress in lockstep with each other. I think maturing is about how we do research. So how we as researchers are growing in our craft. And as Risha pointed out, as teams are starting out, that's often about methods and continuing to add to the toolbox of methods that you have on offer. But leveling up our expertise in the craft of research is then also about our skill in designing studies, building our moderation skills, becoming really good at crafting data gathering mechanisms, whether that's the moderation guide or a survey or your diary study prompts and the cadence for that, or a retrospective experience mapping activity that you're going to use in your in-person session. And then there's building our qualitative analysis skills and designing new ways to share findings that make them more compelling or inspiring for the people that we're doing our readouts for. It's also about beyond just the craft. I think it's about maturing how we as an organization are using research, right? So helping our design and product partners to build their expertise in using research to inform the decisions they're consistently making, and to make it possible for them to kind of keep coming back to that well of knowledge, which they can use to build their confidence in the decisions that they need to make, and which we're really responsible for keeping it full with new evidence around those insights. Scaling can certainly relate to scaling the amount of research we're able to do, but I mostly actually use it to refer to scaling impact. The first solution that always comes to mind is more exploratory research that will inform product ideas earlier in the cycle. And yes, absolutely, that will create more impact. But I don't think we should shortchange the value created by scaling the impact of each and every study, even the smaller ones. When we learn something in one small study that's done for a team, they'll take that, they'll make some changes, roll it out, and move on. But if we can capture those learnings and catalog them and categorize them for easy access later, then the next team for whom that insight is also useful can consider it in a brand new context and maybe run with it without ever launching a study. And if you multiply that by multiple insights and multiple teams making use of all of those, then the impact is scaling.
It sounds like even though the two of you have different definitions and responses, you've approached it in similar ways. And so I'm wondering, what have you learned from each other's different ways of scaling and maturing within your practices? Risha?
So I would say I've been really inspired by Dana's foundational process making for her team. She is a REOPS leader. She was one of the co-organizers of the REOPS conference this year, and so she really is an expert in this. And I've looked to her and what she's been able to build as a testament for how you have to have the vision in place, but you also have to have a process that is built to accommodate, say, an intake process, accommodate the actual fleshing out of timelines, et cetera. So I will say I've drawn a lot of inspiration from data. In terms of execution, I need a lot of help. That's not necessarily where my particular talent lies. I am much more vision oriented and all about design thinking, throwing things at the wall, seeing what sticks, and how you can use human-centered rationale and reasoning and relationship building to kind of foment that practice within American Express. But I have been, extraordinarily lucky to be able to have lots of coffee chats with Dana and members of her team to learn what they have done on their side.
And what about you, Dana?
So it's funny because we connect all the time, Risha and I, but we've never really talked about this particular topic specifically. I think there's first, Risha, thank you for all of the compliments. You're very sweet. And I think there's a complementary personality metric happening within there between the vision and the operational. But I think there's a lot to be learned by seeing how another team is going after the same challenges, which is much of the reason that people attend webinars just like this one, right? To get a look at how other teams are taking on the challenges that we're all facing, because we really are all facing the same challenges. And that happens between our two teams as well. So there are some things across teams that we can just lift and reuse, right? Or we could make together. And then in other spots, it's more inspiration or food for thought that we're learning. I think there have been a couple of instances where Risha's team was able to get a little scrappy and innovative in a space that no other team had actually gone before. And whenever a team is brave enough to do that, especially at a company like ours, it immediately kind of opens the door for the rest of us.
How has research typically looked at Amex? We've talked about scaling and maturing in this conversation, but has it always included research in Amex's strategy? Is this newly implemented, or is this really foundational? What's your perspective on that, Dana?
Well, so Amex was founded in 1850. No one was using the language of customer centricity or user experience or digital journeys in 1850, but I do think the spirit behind that language actually has a long history at this company. A customer-centric approach tends to be baked into the Amex strategy, even when it's being formed beyond, like outside of the digital space, outside of the UX and product realm. And that's often wonderfully helpful, as those strategies will trickle down to us, and you can kind of feel some of the baked in customer centricity that's coming along with them.
And what do you think, Risha?
So, truth, there is no typical at Amex. What looks like a single company from the outside, I experience on a daily basis as hundreds of different products and people that differ in process, personality, tech, et cetera. I mean, accordingly, people's attitudes and understanding of UX research also differ vastly. So, echoing Dana, Amex has always been a company that cares deeply about customer service. And that's a crucial element of the user experience. So long before I became an Amex employee, I just heard from many, many friends and family members about how legendary the client solutions, or what's called on the outside like customer care team, is in resolving problems of the users. So that is very foundational to its identity and brand. In terms of my personal experience of UX research adoption at Amex, I'd say it's a work in progress. Building personal relationships within the company, demonstrating UX research success in terms that others respond to are all part of the equation. And the biggest hurdle has been in persuading others to adopt new methods that add time to the product delivery process, and to make a case and process for why that investment is worth it. So our team is about 5 years old overall. We also consist of a team of designers, operations, and research professionals. And in terms of the research arm of that UX team, to give you a sense of the maturity of the team, I was just promoted at the beginning of the year to this newly created position of director. So, we are very much kind of transitioning and building our case day by day.
Risha, you mentioned that it's a work in progress, and so I'm sure measuring that progress is critical. How would you define success? How do you really measure that impact beyond dollar value?
So defining success always depends on the context. Who are you speaking to? What do they care about? Why are you defining success in the first place, and to what end? Generally, I think that within a corporation, the most helpful kind of goal setting and impact evaluation stems from having a co-created experience vision as the thing you're building. So the vision has the potential to unite cross-functional colleagues, oftentimes hundreds of people located in different continents. And through this shared vision that's focused on how you'll improve someone's life, you can connect what you're doing to what you're delivering for the end user, and set goals that have a measurable impact laddering to the vision. And that's how I think you should define and measure success within the context of a corporation.
All down to that end user. I really appreciate that perspective. What about you, Dana? How do you define success and measure that impact?
I think in terms of research and the practice of research, when we're talking about impact or measuring it, we're generally referring to what we're learning and how that's making a measurable difference in our users' experiences and helping us to meet our KPIs. But I think success, as we build our practices, success also means doing high quality, rigorous research work. So for any given study, we consider whether we've informed the research question. We can also assess the validity of our conclusions and how we've contributed to the team's confidence in making whatever decision they were hoping to make. It could also refer to making the most of our budget and the resources that are available to us, but we can also think about the experience that our research creates. So like for participants, we interact with a whole lot of people. What are we doing to ensure that that's a worthwhile, pleasant, helpful experience and not an annoying one? And what about the experience that our observers are having, especially in a remote research space when there are no observation room snacks to keep people happy between sessions? Is that experience adding to the observer's day in a positive and productive way? And is the experience of helping to make research happen, is that an amazing one? Maybe not amazing, maybe a good one. But carrying forward this same line of thinking, what about the experience that researchers are having? Moderating sessions can be super rewarding, but it isn't necessarily fun, right? Especially if the topic or even just the flow of the conversation moves into a more emotionally tense place or a heavy place. How are we supporting researchers in those moments? And what's the experience that we're creating for researchers beyond the session? Are we building a practice that allows them to do their best work, that allows them to grow in their craft and take on entirely new challenges or learn from all of the people around them and make contributions they can really be proud of? And all of these are things that we can capture and measure and track over time. Much of it is qualitative data, but thankfully we actually have those skills.
And so not just end user specific for success, but also internal team specific for success. Are there any examples you can give? Can you share any products or services you're particularly proud of or you feel made a very significant contribution?
I think the ones that are top of mind always seem to be the ones we're working on making a significant contribution to. I don't know what that's a chronic what have you done for me lately problem, but we do have a few initiatives that have stretched across research and design and product and analytics, where we're tasked with coming together to solve the more complex and intractable problems and think a bit more holistically about the experiences that we're creating. And it actually forces us all to step outside of our areas and consider things from other groups' perspectives, learn what's motivating them and what standards they're being held to. And when a qualitative researcher, a designer, and an analytics engineer actually find their way to a common language, which does take time and is really fascinating to watch, it's a very nice achievement when they finally get there.
What about you, Risha? Do you have any particular products or services that you're proud of or made you feel like there was a very significant contribution?
Sure. Well, I think that my team's past year's work on our corporate card management platform has been outstanding. This is a huge effort for American Express, an uplifting of a system that dates to the 90s. And at the beginning of the year, together with all the product owners, the researchers on this project co-created a research roadmap that laid out the majority of the studies for the year. And each of those studies were tied to a particular team's top desired outcomes and questions about the user. The result has been study after study this year that has delivered crucial information about the user to guide product creation and iteration. The work has not stopped at the studies. They've also used insights from the studies to facilitate cross-functional workshops to define MVPs that center user needs and behaviors for this corporate card management platform. So I am really, really just impressed by the work they've done on that.
It's always difficult to iterate a very traditional product, and so I'm consistently impressed in your leadership to help do so with UX research. Are there any specific examples of methodologies or research strategies that have really been truly impactful, Risha?
Yes, and one of those I just mentioned you were involved in, Joseph. We together co-created a research roadmap for our banking product with all of the product owners and used a 3-part phase that I had hawked from a amazing conference that I had attended, the Qualitative Researchers Association, where you have a collaborative session asking what questions are on folks' mind, an internal session afterwards in which the researchers together ideate on how to turn those questions into discrete studies. And then the third workshop is a prioritization exercise in which you again reconvene with the product owners and really start to flesh out a roadmap. And that's a way that you can get out of the cycle of completely reactive research and put some proactive stuff on the books. It's also a way to transform people's UX maturity, or kind of understanding of how questions about the users can drive decisions that they're going to make about their product. And I just want to say that external vendors in this process have been an incredible and invaluable partner throughout the journey. And that goes from providing resources in the form of embedded consultants, strategic direction, research ops, ad hoc research, and just plain old moral support.
It's wonderful to hear. What about you, Dana? Are there any specific examples of methodologies or strategies that were truly impactful in your work the last year or so?
It seems like it's always the methods and approaches that our observers and stakeholders haven't experienced yet that provide the most impact to at least to those individuals, right? We recently did a diary study that lasted over 6 weeks, and we set up a Slack channel to share the interesting things coming up that week and the highlight reels of participants sharing whatever they had to say on that week's prompt. And for stakeholders not familiar with that method, it was just a wonderful and fun way to engage with research and seemed to make what they were hearing more memorable. But beyond the kind of building new fans of research type of impact, we can incorporate multiple ways of learning about a topic that are additive rather than choosing one method. Go with multiple different ways of coming at that, but making sure that they're building on each other. And we can consider some angles and contexts that we aren't yet coming from. There, like when we face the more intractable problems, and we keep on learning in research, and we learn from usage analytics and our online feedback, and we adjust and improve the feature, but it's still falling short of where it should be. The question to ask, I think, becomes, what other lenses might we apply to that problem? What can we learn by employing a different analytical frame? If we shift the lens maybe from an individual's interaction with the feature to the social or cultural context around the use of the feature, then that opens up a whole new set of questions that we can ask in that context. And new patterns start to emerge that lead us down a very different solution path. So not one methodology, but multiple, I'd say.
Yeah, and that also brings us all the way back to the previous conversation about scaling and maturing, allowing you to do so. So finally, let's wrap up by talking a little bit about the future. And if we have any time, we'll take some Q&A from some of the great feedback that we've gotten so far. So Dana, what do you think is in the cards for the future?
I think research will become much more ingrained in the daily activities of the teams that are doing the designing and building and delivering of products for our users. I think it will actually become standard at companies large and small and in between to have insights into our customers and markets and products from all of the insights disciplines. So research, analytics, online feedback, market research, to have those insights and the evidence and the stories that are backing them up and the context around them that makes it easier to grasp, all at the fingertips of designers and product managers. I think that will become an ordinary and expected thing. And I think the research that's done in industry will start to grow up. I think there will be much more room for the kind of thinking and investigation that you find outside of industry that's grounded in theoretical perspectives that are already really critical to that work outside of corporate spaces. And we will begin to regularly rely on those large bodies of work that already exist to help us make sense of people and how they operate in the world. That's my prediction.
What a beautiful future that would be. What about you, Risha? What's in the cards for the future of this?
So I can definitely say from my time at American Express, I think that as a result of the increased competition from fintech over the last few years, more and more teams are in search of unbiased data that identifies fundamental needs and behavior. So exactly what Dana has pointed to, that you need this in order to be competitive in the marketplace. It's no longer a nice to have. In a large company like Amex, folks are also thinking carefully about how to more closely connect products and services together to form a seamless ecosystem. Personally, I'm interested in what role AI and machine learning might play in the future of product design at American Express, and I'm hoping that with its increased usage, there's also parallel development of product research that prevents misuse and collection of biased data. And I'm really happy to report that as of quite recently, there is a product inclusion team at Amex that hopefully will start to influence processes and company self-reflection around these types of issues.
Thanks for sharing that. And Risha, how does that maturity of your UX research practice help to positively impact this future that you see?
So again, in the context of a large corporation like Amex, if you can tell a compelling story about your users, grounded in solid evidence about why the changes you're proposing will solve a problem that is central to their life and aligns with business objectives, you are much more likely to have people repeat it. And hopefully that story will make its way to a decision maker who can give you crucial buy-in to make the thing happen. It's all about telling the right stories at the right time so that we can change people's hearts and minds.
And what's your perspective on that, Dana? How does the maturity of your UX research practice help to positively impact your products and services in the future?
I think the better we are at the craft and the higher the quality of our deliverables and the variety that we're bringing there, our studies and our learnings, then the more useful and directly actionable they are to the teams that are designing and building those products and services. It's a slightly higher level perspective on that, but I think the leveling up that we do pays off.
And I'd like to wrap up this section by talking a little bit about, what you're excited to level up in. And so, Dana, I'm wondering, what are some areas you're excited to grow in, expand upon, grow your knowledge in? Where are you most excited as you look towards the future?
There's a conversation in the research world about interoperability and creating a seamless flow of information across workspaces and tools. And I'm super excited to see where that conversation goes. Because imagine if we had an ecosystem of platforms and integrations and tools that let us meet people in different disciplines where they're at, with sets of research information and insights and evidence that they need, and the robust APIs and data portability that make it possible for that to arrive in the home systems that they're working with.
And Risha, you mentioned AI, machine learning, and product inclusion. Is there anything more specifically that you're really excited to expand upon or grow your knowledge in?
Well, actually, I'm going to pivot away from systems and methods to your chagrin. I'm a new manager and I am in growth mode myself. And the things I want to learn are related to finding a way to support myself and others through a really, really difficult time. And our current moment is hard in the workplace. How do we find connection with each other and our products in a hybrid, remote, and in-person environment? How do we mitigate the impact of the pandemic on people's lives to foster a more fulfilling work environment? Outside of my own immediate working situation, I want to know, how can I, as a worker, what can I do in my position of privilege to help people gain more access to financial services, tools, and resources so they can find more stability in their lives? These are all questions I'm pondering.
I really appreciate both the business acumen that each of you share and the very, human way that you approach your roles and the ways that you've answered these questions today. Thank you so much for sharing that, Risha. Lynette, do I have time for one or two Q&A questions?
Yes, I think we have time for just one or two exactly.
Okay, great. So Dana, why don't you tackle this one? How do you approach UX practices in developed and or emerging markets?
Oh, yeah. So from the standpoint of markets that are emerging for us, where we're growing a customer base, there's always a higher bar for the logistics when we're working in other languages than English, and we need to support like simultaneous translation and leave time to translate any of the materials that we're bringing into sessions. when the time zones are upside down and live observation is out for everyone but the most obsessed product managers staying up all night, but our approaches to gathering data are otherwise very similar. The piece it's important to not miss is the added time it takes to prior to finalizing and running that research, the time it takes to build out our cultural understanding before we settle on exactly what we're talking about or exactly what prototypes we'll be sharing. In financial services, we find there might be lots to learn about the cultural ideas around saving and spending, handling of cash, comfort with carrying debt. And understanding all of those things is critical to being able to focus the research in the right way and also to do solid analysis, right? To not blow by the assumptions that you carry with you from your home country, and to actually take into context the space that you're working in. Local resources are pretty much the key to making all of that a success, I think.
Thanks for sharing that. And finally, we've talked a lot about best practices and the right methods and expanding the methods that we use. Risha, I'm wondering, how do you stay on top of best practices and use the right method for the job instead of these same cookie cutter testing that might exist or is an expectation with some partners in the industry?
Right. So I've talked a lot in this time about context and how it's very important to understand how to ask a question at the right time. So in terms of where I go with my research team, instead of having another team come to us and say, we need usability testing, I like to center around the particular questions that they might have in mind and the questions that we can ask as UX researchers that we might be able to find answers to. So just being able to set objectives through that kind of inquisitiveness, a sense of curiosity and scoping a problem, I think are very useful in getting away from that more formulaic, whatever the process may be for shaping a particular product. I think that you really need to understand like what outcome would result in success and what's missing in order to get you there, in order to then use the power of research, which is to get the evidence that's needed to answer those questions.
Absolutely. Curiosity as a process, I think, is something I really stick to that you just shared. Dana, would you have anything to add there?
I don't. I think once again, Risha has said it very completely.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both. I really appreciate your time. I'll pass it to Lynette to wrap up.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joseph. So that about wraps it up for today. Thank you so much to our panelists, Dana, Risha, and Joseph, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. If you found this discussion useful or informative, you can follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And we also produce lots of great content on our Insights blog very regularly on all things UX research, so I would really encourage you to check that out. Keep an eye on your inbox for a link to this webinar recording and information on more upcoming webinars. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone again for joining, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.